Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Community Nostalgia here, and I got some of my Scarlet Crusade gear. I've been farming that for a couple of days over here on Nictar Moon. But yeah, I see that Asmongold uploaded a video, and it still kind of shocks me to see people talking about this stuff because this was pretty taboo not that long ago. It's something that you would get in trouble for even mentioning on YouTube. And if it wasn't Google that squashed your ass, the woke mafia would take care of you pretty quickly. And it just seemed like it didn't really get a lot of traction. Now, y'all know, if you've been around the channel for a while, that I've talked about Weimar Republic and how it's basically America 2.0 right now, and large parts of Europe. It's this reactionary thing where the left pisses off the right, and the right gets pissed off, and it spills into chaos, and it's just not a good thing. It's bad for society, but it is coming, and I've been called multiple names for pointing that out. Alex Jones of the MMO community, etc. I got a little bit of a reputation in my small community for this kind of shit, but it's interesting to see Asmon talking about this. So let's see what he had to say real quick. Now this is regarding the whole Penguinz0 thing or whatever, and what he said about kids having the right to
the truth
sex
is, like,
change.
you're seeing a massive backlash against a lot of like LGBT stuff, and
Right.
I think that the primary backlash isn't against the LG or B, it's against the T.
Yeah.
A lot of people are pushing back super hard on trans stuff.
Right, but it's not just that. It's the fact that the LG and B became kind of militant and started marching with like flags. I don't know if you're aware of what it is when somebody marches with a flag. Like if I were to take the American flag and go to Afghanistan right now with that shit, I'd be in trouble if I marched down their street. So it's seen as a sign of aggression when you have a flag and you march like, yeah, what the F are you gonna do about it? You know, deal with this shit. We're here to stay. We're loud. We're proud. A lot of people who were supporting them in the past are like, well, this isn't the shit I signed up for. My take on this was, hey, live and let live, man, whatever. And then it slowly started turning into, no, F you, we're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to rally against you politically. So now you're starting to see a backlash to all of it, in my opinion. It's just a lot of people don't have the balls to say that. They don't want to be seen as a quote-unquote bigot. But a lot of us don't really give a shit about that anymore. We kind of wear it as a badge, and it's like, yeah, oh, whatever. You know, you start acting all militant about the way you believe, and people are going to push back against you. I mean, even Christians, we get that crap all the time. If we come out too strong against people, that's a sin, and you're going to go to hell, and start wagging our fingers at people, they get pissed off. Okay, and it's like a religion. The woke is like a religion. They worship at the altar of cultural Marxism.
Especially with kids, and especially with like athletes, right? And so this has happened, and the reason why it's happened, I'll tell y'all why it's happened, is because for 5 years, 10 years, you were not able to say a single fucking thing
Damn
that was
right.
not in that direction.
He's absolutely right. Sorry, I'm swearing over here. But yes, he's absolutely correct. You couldn't say anything. And if you did, you were canceled for it in numerous different ways. And you know, if you're a big content creator, I mean, my channel is really small time. It's always been. But if you had something to lose, you did not want to touch that shit with a 10-foot pole. Because it was basically career suicide. And now people are so fed up with it. And it's so in their face that they're starting to clap back against it. And I've warned that that's going to get nasty. Because it got nasty in the past.
And now that you can, everybody is making up for lost time.
Yeah.
Because this is the truth is, you actually ask the amount of people that legitimately think about this shit, no, the majority of people do not support it.
Nope.
They do not.
They
and
don't.
you look at any opinion poll, and that's the fact. And so whenever you make people live with their mind in a cage, that's only going to last for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if it's a dictatorship. It doesn't matter if it's a mental, like you look at McCarthyism, and then what happened after McCarthyism? Well, you had the 60s with the hippies and everything.
Right. Well, the thing about McCarthyism is they don't even really tell you the facts about McCarthyism and how that all went. Now, there's a channel that I would point to I can't say what platform it's on, I don't think. You really have to watch what you say over here now, man. It's pretty draconian and Orwellian over here on YouTube, and it sucks what it's turned into. But I'm going to have it up on your screen. Go check out what he has to say about McCarthy and all that stuff. Now, bearing in mind, I don't agree with everything this fella says. He's much more extreme than I am. I'm more moderate than all of that, but he's definitely going to offend some people if you take me up on that and go watch it, because he's pretty hard right. But what he says about McCarthy and all that stuff, I have to agree with it. So I would recommend checking that out.
And you have things go back and forth, back and forth. So you got to think about, like, Adolf was a reaction, because, like, in the 1930s and, a bit before then, after World War I, Berlin and Germany and everything, like, it was, like, Berlin, bro, like, that shit was, like, that was like one of the most progressive capitals in the whole world. It was buck wild. Like, they had the first transgender assignment surgery in between World War I and World War II.
Yes, Magnus Hirschfeld it started that. And he was from a certain group of people.
Opium was widely available, and also drugs were used in sexual science. Sexual scientists were very interested in the effects of, for instance, morphine would have on the orgasmic rate of a lesbian. So there was a complete scientific culture.
Berlin had become the center of sexual experimentation. It also became the center of scientific research into sex, led by a pioneering doctor.
Long before Kinsey or Masters and Johnson, there was one German who is credited with inventing the whole notion of sexology or sexual science. And this was a very funny character called Papa, or the Einstein of sex in Berlin. It was Magnus Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld was a queer, Jewish, social democrat, and a great liberal who really defined the liberal spirit of Berlin.
The crusading doctor for sexual freedom was also the founder of the world's first institute devoted to the scientific study of sex.
He had an institute in the very center of Berlin that became something of a tourist attraction because it was a huge complex that had the biggest library on sexual matters and pornography ever assembled since the Romans. But most of all, he was remembered for having a museum. The museum was a collection of fantastic materials, of sexual machinery from the past. Masturbation machines, chastity belts, flagellation machines. The greatest collection of fetishism, of sexual artifacts from World War I and long before. And it was a good place to start learning about the underside of Berlin.
You could go and look at various fetish items. For example, he had these trousers that if you wore a trench coat, you could walk around Berlin. It looked like you had pants on because the lower parts of the trousers were there, but then you had nothing on above them, and you could flash this way. This was thought to be very titillating, very amusing. So it was this sort of thing you could see in the Institute for Sexual Research.
Unlike his fellow doctor in Vienna, Sigmund Freud, Hirschfeld advocated the radical notion that human sexuality could be studied without imposing moral judgments.
Hirschfeld's also credited with operations and surgeries of sex change and sexual rejuvenation. He had a clinic for people to be consulted about sexual problems.
Homosexuals, transvestites, and transsexuals streamed into his clinic for help and understanding.
This is quite incredible. Why do we have two eyes? Is there some law that says we must? Two arms, two legs, two ears, two breasts.
Today I had lunch with the goddess. Steinman, she said, I'm here to free you from the tyranny of the commonplace. I'm here to show you a new kind of beauty. I asked her, what do you mean, goddess? Symmetry, dear Steinman. It's time we did something about symmetry.
What can I do with this one, Aphrodite? She won't stay still! I want to make them beautiful, but but they always turn out wrong. That one too fat. This one too tall. This one too symmetrical. And now, what's this goddess? An intruder. He's ugly. 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 Ugly.
Well, again, I have to be very careful about what I say here. But he was from that people group, and he started a sex change clinic, and it's pretty nasty stuff. I've covered it in When Nations Fall, Echoes of Weimar Republic. I've got the full version off-site. I recommend you check that out because they documented that stuff, and they were very proud about what they were doing, and yeah, it definitely elicited a response.
Inside of Germany. This was like a crazy, crazy thing. And so again, and the book burnings, right? They said that's whenever the Nazis burned all the fucking books. Now,
Right.
did they burn the books because of what they said, or because
Yes.
they associated them with Jewishness and they didn't like that,
Kind of.
and they wanted all the books to be written in German instead? There's a
Well,
bit.
well, no, they were in German. The books were in the German language. What they didn't like about the books is that they had a lot to do with sex change. Now, there were different books. I obviously can't tell you every single book that they burned, but a lot of it was leftish propaganda that they were trying to get rid of. And and like I said, it involved the whole sex change clinic thing. And they were trying to get rid of smut, basically, and things like that. So we're seeing more speeches because the AI is able to translate what Adolf was saying.
The German nation was, thanks to the inflation instigated and carried through by Jews, deprived of the entire savings which it had accumulated in years of honest work, when the rest of the world took away the German nation's foreign investments, when we were divested of the whole of our colonial possessions. These philanthropic considerations evidently carried little noticeable weight with democratic statesmen.
And for a lot of people, I think we all just thought he was just banging his fist and yelling and screaming about Jews. But now more and more people are seeing what he was actually talking about, and they're going, "Wow, that's exactly what's happening in America and in large portions of Europe." They came in and they changed the art and they made it kind of ugly, and the left, by they, which is what I'm talking about. I don't want people to think that I'm just saying, "Oh, all these people came in from a Jewish background and did this," but it is worth noting that a lot of them were from that background, and it was basically communism. The communism that had taken hold in Russia started to take hold in Germany, and they weren't having it, okay? They were starting revolutions everywhere, and they were slowly starting to make a ruckus. Again, I went into that more in Echoes of Weimar Republic. They had their own George Floyd moments and stuff like that, okay?
Bold, radical play that was almost immediately denounced by the Nazis had just opened. It was written by one of Berlin's most prominent bohemians and one of its most prominent communists.
Bertolt Brecht was very much a self-proclaimed proletariat. He wanted to represent the views of the working class of Berlin. He quite deliberately cultivated this look, so he always wore dirty clothes and he always had a sort of half-chewed, half-smoked cigar in his mouth, and he always had dirty fingernails and tried to cultivate the look of the proletariat. He, with Kurt Weill, who of course produced together the Three-Penny Opera.
It was 1928 when they collaborated on one of the most important and most successful musicals to ever open in Berlin. The Three-Penny Opera, filled with discontent and disillusionment, had captured on stage the essence of this sin city called Berlin.
This was on the one hand a very political piece because it was focusing on the poor people in Berlin who make their life with little crimes in the nightclubs, who don't care about the rules of society. And as well, on the other hand, it was exactly this motivation which gave them this erotic charm. So it was a kind of sexual revolution, but as well a political revolution, and all this in a marching kind of sound, women's freedom, proletarians' freedom. It was marching forward in his music.
But it was a music that was being slowly drowned out by a louder, more strident sound. Berlin was in an upheaval.
So you can see here how they were using the lower class against the upper class. And that's what they've done in America with the whole racial tension thing with George Floyd. And we've seen the George Floyd thing over and over and over again. And that is something that they use to get us to fight each other. And it works. And they did it in the past. It's the same exact thing that we're seeing today. This is exactly the same thing. It's just they're like, oh, hey, look at this guy that got laid out by the fascists. What are you guys going to do about it, huh? It's agitation. And they would rally people. They would create songs about it and just kind of pit the middle class and the upper class against the lower class. And it was very effective. People got pissed off, man. And the results were horrible. It was not a good thing. And yeah, it's happening again.
The history to this, it's a little bit complicated. So both, right? It's
actually pretty
both,
simple,
right? It was a cultural and also a it was multiple things at the same time, right? And so, both probably. And so you can see how shit goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you see it now with what MoistCritical said. If he had said that 3 years ago, everybody would have been totally okay with it.
I don't think so.
Everybody would have been there would have been a bunch of tweets, celebrating it, and now there's a bunch of tweets hating on him for it.
Maybe, but there would have been backlash to it. It just wouldn't have been as loud. But yeah, to iterate on what I was saying a little bit more, they had put lesbians on the radio to try to recruit housewives and schoolgirls, and that comes out of their own mouth in their own documentary that they made years ago. I'll let you listen to a portion of that.
There was a broad range of female types within the Sapphic culture. It wasn't just the plain old butch femme. You had this broad variation of women. And you had something called the sharper, who was the older, independent woman who knew all these languages and seduced young housewives and converted young schoolgirls, who was the older, independent woman who knew all these languages and seduced young housewives and converted young schoolgirls.
So they were definitely trying to elicit a response. They also had this thing called Dada, which was meant to mock the right and piss off the right. That was the entire movement was about that, was trying to elicit a response from the right.
And she met a decadent artist, Rudolf Schlichter, and changed his life forever.
While they would indulge in a wide variety of strange sexual experiments involving violence and death, all in the name of art, Rudolf Schlichter's particular passion focused on one piece of Speedy's attire.
He was drawn to the laced boot. So Speedy's laced boots are very much a part of his sexuality. He began to do millions of erotic drawings based on her, and also based on her laced boot.
While boots might have been Rudolf Schlichter's great obsession, he was also for a time devoted to a movement known as Dada, which mocked anything to do with authority. His good friend and fellow Dadaist was George Gross, a painter who captured perhaps more vividly than any other artist the depravity and disillusionment of life in Berlin.
George Gross was a social critic. You'll see bloated plutocrats pigging out at the table while right next door are emaciated prostitutes. It's this kind of juxtaposition of hedonism on the one hand and utter despair and poverty on the other that interested him.
He was asked, why do you draw all these people so ugly and mean and stuff? I mean, I walked down the street coming in here. The people looked okay. And my father is supposed to have said, yes, but I know what they're like underneath, inside. And that's what I show in the face. To me, it's just a way of showing, this is what goes on behind your fine facade.
Gross made no one look particularly attractive, but he took special pleasure in satirizing a little-known demagogue making noise in the southern city of Munich.
He was guilty of one of the first cartoons, really famous cartoons against Hitler, where he depicted Hitler, I think it was about 1922 or so, as this Wagnerian character with a bear fur on him and a spear.
For that cartoon and many others to follow, George Gross was put on an enemies list by Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party.
And I personally do not believe, through many hours of researching this kind of stuff, that it just dynamically happened. That's the normie take. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to Asmon or anybody else, because I didn't understand any of this stuff either until I spent a long time studying it. But it's not a natural thing. The left didn't just, oh, well, one day they started going crazy naturally, and then a natural response happened on the right. No, it's orchestrated. It's something that is organized from the top down. Just like with all this LGBTQ stuff you see in everything from World of Warcraft down to even EverQuest, Disney, all these major companies, Burger King, all like, what do Oreos have to do with gay rights and all that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So why is it being pushed across the board everywhere all at once? Because it's coming from the top down. It's coming from the government. Because the government are not our friends. The left and the right do not care about you. That's my message to you right now, is that they don't care about you. They love to get order out of chaos. They will put left against right, and when they both rub up against each other and there's nothing left, they get their central goal. It's called Hegelian dialectic. Look into Hegelian dialectic. I've mentioned it many times. Hopefully I have a new audience here that is hearing this for the first time, because I want you to research this stuff. Don't take what I say or anybody ever says at face value. Go look it up on your own, okay? Look it up, because you're going to see that there's a pattern here. And a lot of the stuff that Adolf was bitching about was the centralization of their currency in the hands of people he didn't want it in. They wanted their own sovereign currency. He didn't like the fact that the left was just openly recruiting. They were on the radio. They had changed the music.
Not only was sex in the air in the Berlin of the 20s, it was also on the air, celebrated in song by Berlin's favorite performer.
Almost everybody in Berlin had a radio receiver at home, and Claire Waldorf was everywhere. Everybody in Berlin knew Claire Waldorf was the first official lesbian in Berlin, and she did not make a secret out of it. And she basically had tried to convince all women who were important in culture that to be a lesbian is quite a nice thing.
They had changed the art and made it into something that personally I think is ugly. I mean, what do you make of this? Does this imagery look good to you? No, and if you look back at older German art and music and stuff like Wagner, how you say his name, and all of the things they were doing before that, you can see that somebody was basically coming in and tearing down their statues and deleting their history and trying to demoralize them. It was happening, and if you study it, you'll see that very clearly. Okay, like I said, I can tell you these things, but you have to study them out on your own. And in that way, it's a lot stronger for you too, because you did your own research, man. I feel like as a society, people just like to get facts quickly from content creators and form an opinion, and that's just not a good thing. We shouldn't be doing that. You really want to study out things. So I would encourage you to do that. Now there's a video, it's like 12 hours long. It's a multi-part video. I don't even know if I can mention it over here without getting canceled or without, committing elgo. Can't say that word anymore on YouTube. And there are things in that I don't really vibe with. But if you look into what they're telling you, and if you research it, and this is a big time sink, man, I'm not going to lie to you. If you want to go down this rabbit hole, you're going to have to spend a lot of time studying it out. Like I said, the video itself is like 12 hours long, if you can even track it down anymore. I don't know. I haven't watched it in a while. But you'll find it on alt media sites probably. And it's going to open your eyes to a lot of things, that's for sure. But I don't want to see anybody become radicalized. That's not what I'm trying to do. And what I've done with this over the past few years and trying to warn people is that you stay out of the coming fight. I don't want anybody going on the extreme left or the extreme right, because like I said, those two forces are used against each other, and neither side benefits from how this is going to end. And it doesn't end well, unfortunately. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. I think it's interesting that these mainstream personalities are starting to talk about this stuff now, because things are starting to heat up. And there's going to be two sides that are drawn into a conflict. That's why I think it's being allowed out, so that people can get just enough information to pick a side, get pissed off, and unfortunately play the useful idiot.
Tourists coming from all over the world, $10 in American money could buy you anything you wanted.
People were renting out their bodies. People that you wouldn't believe, like generals and their wives that couldn't have been terribly attractive, would engage in public sex in their living room if there was any Japanese, Turks, or Americans who would pay for it, who would pay $1 for it.
With entire life savings disappearing through hyperinflation and desperate for hard currency, middle-class Berliners transformed their homes into houses of pleasure for tourists.
There was one family that actually turned this into quite a high art form, if you like, from a pornographic point of view. They started a little club called Aleifa, which is an acronym in German for Alles eine Familie, which really means all in the family. And this was run by mum, dad, and 2 daughters, but it developed into a club where every possible sexual taste was catered for.
Hausfraus became harlots, teenagers turned tricks, and Papa became a pimp.
When you have unemployed, you also have an increase in sex workers. But it wasn't just Berliners. It was tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of young boys and young girls who were coming to Berlin to participate in this hard currency sex traffic. It was tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of young boys and young girls who were coming to Berlin to participate in this hard currency sex traffic.
If you knew what to look for, you could find anything known to man in the sexual world was available on the streets of Berlin.
On any given night, as many as 100,000 prostitutes walked the streets or worked the sex clubs across the city.
There were all different cars with different kinds of makeup on the street. For instance, one was called Mutzi. Mutzis who were prostitutes who hung out on just one street, Mutzstrasse, and these were pregnant prostitutes. And this being Germany, instead of just having pregnant prostitutes together, they were strung out on the street according to how pregnant that they were, so limousines stopping there could choose exactly how pregnant they wanted their Mutzi. There were prostitutes who looked horrible, who had acid-scarred faces, or hunchbacks, or were lame or crippled. These were called grasshoppers. You had mother and daughter teams on one street that dressed exactly alike.
Here in Berlin, sex for sale offered every sort of perversion or fetishism imaginable. There was not a sexual appetite that could not be satisfied in this city.
There were clubs where lesbians liked to whip schoolboys, and you'd find military officers sitting there with painted children sitting on their laps. So a lot of it was play acting, but there were quite a lot of people who also indulged in it.